ngā kuaha o te tika, o te pono, o te māramatanga I tēnei wā I ngā wā katoa. Ko I hukraiti hoki tōna kaiwhako. Āmene. Mene krihi me te.
Just firstly, apologies for Tanya, she's just running a little bit late. She's just finishing off prize giving at school. She'll be with us shortly. Before I hand over to Andrew, we have effectively finished our induction sessions. So there's give them some feedback to the sessions that we've held since and today we'll start off the workshops around
Well, I thought I would start by telling you a little good short story. Some of you might know that our shoreline was inundated by lakeweed a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. Since then, we've had teams from our council, regional council, and TOLT working sometimes 12 hours a day cleaning it up. And some of you might know that I even got out of bed at 5:30 in the morning to be on TV, which is quite a stretch for me. The good news is the business community have given us some amazing feedback on how quickly we've reacted. And both Wairiki Spa and businesses like Lime Cafe have written to us to tell us how quickly and efficiently we've worked. And in fact, Lime Cafe shouted lunch for our whole crew who did all the clean up by the lakefront. And I've just taken the staff member who was leading that from our organisation up to lunch. So just wanted to let you know it's all cleaned up, it's all ready, and we're doing a debrief next week. So anyway, good positive story. Good Thursday afternoon.
So we're going to hand over to David or Greg?
Me first. Good afternoon, elected members. Thank you for attending today's first workshop of our annual plan 2026-27. So following our induction plan, our induction sessions that we've had, we're now going to lead into a series of workshops over the next couple of months that will lead into developing our annual plan for the next financial year. What we are wanting to achieve today is that we'll bring across some understanding of what was in the long-term plan year 3. We're currently in year 2 of the long-term plan, and we are preparing for year 3 of the long-term plan. We're also looking for direction from you as to one of these options. A, finish what we started in the long-term plan. So do we carry on with our current work program? Do we increase risk tolerance to reduce costs? And we'll have a bit of a discussion about that later on. Ambition to do more in certain areas, and which areas you might want us to look into, or cut costs, and that becomes the primary driver of this annual plan. So we'll have some of these discussions a bit later on once David has finished his presentation. So what we're going to run through today is a bit about what an annual plan is, what our timeline looks like over the next few months. A bit of LTP context and what's happening, what we actually set in the long-term plan and what the financial strategy was as well. What has changed, and so what impacts year 3 from the start and what we know about, and then what the proposed rates increases, and then going into a bit of engagement or development of an engagement plan for and this is on the back of our induction sessions council person that we're keen to bring forward as an IAP2 framework. So very quickly, you would have seen this corporate planning cycle before. Every 3 years we have to do a long-term plan. We are currently in year 2 of our 2024-2034 long-term plan, and we are preparing for year 3. I won't talk too much on that. Just what our timeline looks like. So we've got our first workshop today. Obviously, going into January, late January, early February, we're going to look at a series of workshops depending on what comes out of today. And that's bringing forward some proposals that would potentially be included in the annual plan. We would then go into adopting these proposals for inclusion into a consultation document. This has been practiced over the last 3 or 4 years at Council, where you give us a firm resolution on what proposals you want included in our annual plan. We then go away and develop a consultation document for the community. That gets adopted in March. We will then go and consult with the community over April, with deliberations and hearings in May and adoption in June of the annual plan. That's enough from me, so across to David.
Right. Good afternoon, members. So, really quick recap so that we understand the setting of the long-term plan when we look at year 3. So, when we adopted the long-term plan, it was a challenge. It was a challenging plan to produce. Lots of uncertainty on us as a sector. There's some the challenges in the regulatory compliance space. One of the things I will touch on around inflation is that when there are a number of different types of inflation metrics that get used. So CPI is one. There are the consumer price index. We have the local government cost index, which kind of measures changes in price and the types of things that we buy. There's also something called the capital index, and that's pretty critical because we have contracts with the likes of Smart for our waste, with Trilogy for our wastewater, and a number of others, where the contracts have escalation clauses based around the capital goods cost index. So back in the heady days of CPI being around 8%, the capital goods index topped out just over 13%. So one of the measures I'll talk about that's included in the draft annual plan for 2027 is the fact that a number of our contracts have inflation clauses over and above what you'd expect in CPI because we're contractually bound to the capital goods cost index. So inflation is coming down, but at the time of the LTP was high. We've sort of enjoyed savings in the last annual plan, bringing down that weighted average cost of capital. But that's baked in now to what's priced in, and we adopted the LTP in June 2024. We'll be looking at setting our the finances for year 3. Just a really quick reminder of what the rules we agreed to in the long-term plan are. So within our long-term plan financial strategy, we committed to maintaining existing infrastructure, so it's fit for now and into the future. What that means is that we prioritise renewals, that we are good stewards of the assets we have now, and we make sure that we look after them. We provide infrastructure to accommodate growing districts. So what that means is that we allocate sufficient projects and funding to cater for growth. So that we allow for, as the population of Rotorua grows, that we have the infrastructure in place to cater for that. We invest in the future of our district to deliver community outcomes. So we've got a whole bunch of KPIs essentially in our non-financial performance measures that we have agreed that we will deliver. We've agreed to be good stewards of our assets. We've agreed to balance delivery with affordability. No, there's no blank checkbook. We're aware of what the needs are, but we are realistic around what we can include in a budget to be collected in rates. We use prudent use of debt to support infrastructure and growth. So we don't borrow for operational spending. We borrow in line with policy for long-term intergenerational assets.
David, on that affordability, balancing delivery and affordability, that's affordability of cost to deliver as opposed to affordability of the rates to the ratepayer.
Both. So we have the DIA benchmarks, those graphs with the black, the orange, and the green. So we have metrics in there around what's the limit that we put on ourselves for annual rates increases. We have limits there for what we will allow in debt. So it's a general concept of making sure that we consider affordability.
David, just providing infrastructure to accommodate a growing district. When we say a growing district, are we talking about in the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years?
So the long-term plan considers a 10-year period. So, when we put together our infrastructure strategy, which is a significant section of the long-term plan, that looks forward for 30 years. So that we budget for 10, knowing what we need for 30. So that we're aware of what we need for 30, but we only put 10 on.
Just last night at the Howard Morrison Centre, I spoke to 3 prominent real estate agents from 3 different companies, and every one of them said the same thing. We just don't have enough supply, and I don't see it coming either. So if we're looking at our budgets and going, where are we going to spend our money? Is it prudent to just be careful about expanding our industry?
I mean, almost the entire stormwater capital works program is built around growth. So all of the IAF G now is designed to enable land draining that we can deliver housing. So we have funding committed to deliver it. It's just a tough one. Delivering it is expensive.
I think important. One of the reasons that developers say they don't see demand here is because their cost is higher because they have to cater for things that like stormwater. Whereas if they can be done publicly, their cost to deliver goes down. The value proposition's different. So that's the whole reason for the IIG or IAF funding for the IIG program.
So that we're contracted as part of that agreement to deliver a certain amount. Once that's over,
we're contracted to deliver capacity. We're not contracted to deliver houses.
The benchmark, I know that, but it's thank you.
When we adopted the long-term plan, this is the rates profile that was included in the plan. So last year, in 2026, we had a rates increase in the long-term plan. We came in under that. We came in about 8.5. And in the long-term plan for this year that we're considering for 2027, there was a assumption built in of 7.1% rates increase for the year. That was done, and that was what was set in 2024, and a lot has changed since then. So what happened? What are some of the things that are impacting the 2027 budget? We had the food organic, green organic waste that was to come in last year. We've delayed, this year that we've delayed to come in until next year. So the rating aspect of that was delayed a year. So we'll be coming in 2027. There are significant costs associated with local water done well on the running of 3 waters, and that's particularly driven by the water service delivery plan that we submitted on behalf of council and was approved. Within that water service delivery plan contained, I guess, a direction of travel that we would improve certain aspects of our water activities, and the costs associated with that are starting to come through. I'll go through that shortly, but the costs of delivering water are increasing. There's some changes with our regulatory environment, so particularly with animal control, trends and fewer people registering dogs and what that means for us through enforcement. Changes in the way that we have to do hearings for alcohol monitoring, etc., and for inspections. Just generally a challenging environment for regulatory pressure on user fees and ever-growing cost base, as well as a lot of user fees that are set in legislation, so we can't increase user fees to the extent that our costs have increased. It makes it challenging. So I've touched on before that we are coming to the end of a 5-year fixed plan on our electricity, and we're in the middle of negotiating a new fixed term. That comes off in November next year, so the impact isn't a full year's impact, but it is about 7 months worth of increased pricing in the next annual plan. And there's a note there with more to come, because there are some topics that we will be considering raising over the next several workshops that we may decide to consult on and may decide to include. You may have ideas yourselves that you want to include or remove, and all of those things will be considered for the next couple of workshops.
David, that will take into account the new upcoming proposed legislative changes as well?
Yeah, there's costs in there at the moment, or, well, specifically when it comes to legislative change. A lot of the other we have proposals or we have measures, but we don't have legislation or bills. There's nothing in the House for us to firmly include or hang our hat on for a budget. We're prepared to move when a lot of those things become a little more settled, but at the moment we're aware of them and we're working through understanding what they mean for us. Right, so I showed the slide earlier that said that we had a planned 7.9% increase for rates in the long-term plan. Where we are right now today is the rates increase of 10.79%. So huge driver of that is inflation. So 4.71% of that is inflation, and that's a mixture of both. There's a company called Burl that produces the local government cost index, which is the measure that council has adopted as its inflation guide in the long-term plan, and also those changes within the contracts for Trility and Smart, and those capital goods cost index measures over and above are really high. So 4.71% is inflation before we change anything. We've got a change in interest, and that's not because the rates have changed. It's changed because we're investing about 120 million. Some of that is loan funded, and there's an increase in debt. So that 1.74% on interest represents new borrowing, essentially the cost to service new borrowing. So I've got a slide coming with that. Drills a little deeper into some of these numbers. So wastewater goes up 1.09%, water supply just under 1%, waste management 4.4%. That's got nothing to do with inflation. That is due to some things that that have been entered in to happen within those activities, a change in the work program essentially. Roading, similar for roading.
Includes FOGO.
Includes FOGO. Roading, animal control, and something I touched on earlier, where the cost to enforce people who do not register their dogs. So there's about 12,000 dogs in Rotorua, just over 1,000 of them roughly don't register their dogs, and the cost of us following our legal mandate to enforce that is expensive. Electricity comes in at 0.41%, so that's about an $800,000 increase in electricity. The full year is about 1.5 million, but because we're only dealing with about 7 months of that increase, we're looking at about 800,000 for next year in increased electricity. There's some changes with security, and the costs of audits have almost doubled in the last couple of years. For Audit New Zealand to come for an audit on our annual report, I can remember when I started was just over 200,000. Their latest bill for the annual report we adopted in October was just over 400,000. So audit prices have doubled.
Is it going to be changed if we looked at a different central?
We have canvassed that in previous years. We would need permission from the Office of the Auditor General to change audit providers because our auditor is appointed by them. We have discussed it with them, but the feedback we've had is that Audit New Zealand are probably the only people who are qualified, in their opinion, to adequately do the job of auditing.
The water supply one will have some of the regulatory costs in there too, I presume. The water supply.
So water supply is actually costs of the economic regulator, costs of Commerce Commission, yeah, all that.
400k.
Yeah, I've got a slide shortly.
Oh, sorry, thank you.
So not all things are movements upwards. There are some slight decreases. So I mentioned before there's a delay and a delay from the long-term plan and the opening of the museum. And so there's a timing benefit of those costs arriving later of 0.46%. And we've also had about $1 million reduction in our insurance premiums because we have been able to provide better information on our assets to our insurer, who have taken that and reviewed that better information and considered us a lower risk, and that's come through in our insurance premiums. And that overall rates increase of 10.8% essentially.
Any questions before we move on? Does it give you your baseline to what the base numbers potentially?
So I just want to be clear, we haven't done any work.
Oh, I know, but
We haven't taken your direction on which way to go. This is just blanket.
so I'm just asking if the councillors have any questions or concerns or comments. Greg just mentioned the workshop will be recorded. It will be on the website, and I'm assuming the slides will go as well. Just wondering for the public then, instead of that saying museum coming online, should it be delayed? Because it looks like you're getting some income from the people with the reading.
Yeah, I think we've got to also be careful. I think David had a more to come, but I think in that more to come is the whole museum operations, which we haven't talked about at all. And we haven't done any work on it, which is why we don't know. We can't quantify the impact of that on either next year or the subsequent years. And we're just talking about the expected difference between what was this year and next year.
Sorry, what's the budget for the museum when it is open? Deficit, I assume, and how much? What's the dollar number?
The rate funding requirement for the museum is, depending, we were still working through the operating model, but it'll be in the range of somewhere around 7 to 8 million.
Right. Annual cost to run the museum is 7 to 8 million.
We're working through the.
That includes, correct me if I'm wrong, but that would include depreciation, that would include energy costs, that would include
Depreciation
maintenance.
would be the lion's share of that.
Yeah. Depreciation.
I can provide that for you.
Well, we're going to do the work, so we'll find out.
And that's why I said again, we haven't done that work. We haven't got the direction where we want us to go. We've given you a snapshot of where things are now.
Sally, you want to comment? The public's going to have an expectation that we're a hell of a lot lower than that.
That's why I just wanted to see where councillors are comfortable with that, because so this is our opportunity to give direction about where we want to go. You've now seen some sort of readings to get to 10.79, and I had shared last time that I had expected that we would be looking for a much lower number this time round. And I know this is just the start of this piece of work, but a level of uncomfortableness around that. So this is what this workshop is for, is to explore and see where councils are sitting, seeing what opportunities there are to it's obviously Tanya's now here, so I'll hand back to her, but obviously it's a mayoral-led annual plan. It's for the mayor to lead the annual plan, and I know Tanya and I are agreed on where we think that number should be.
You want to share that number?
Significantly less. I think the key issue that we have here, as you can see, is inflation is incredibly high, but also interest. And so automatically over half of what we're dealing with is actually outside of our hands. And if you were to remove that, then that number is actually more palatable with the community. So I think how we explain what we do as council, but also the uncontrollable that we can't control. And I'm not just talking about government rates capping. Yeah. But my apologies, I'm late. I was at my old media of Kaitau at prize giving, and it went about an hour longer than expected. So I'm here now, and thank you to staff for reviewing this so far.
Can I take a moment to frame that 10% in terms of the proposal that has come out around the wording of the proposed rates cap? So the way that the rates cap is proposed to work is that is a 4% cap, excluding water. So when we take our 10% and carve out water, council is 6.3%, but the water charges are going up 20%. And it's off a smaller number, so the increase is bigger. But overall, if we exclude the impact of Three Waters on council, our rates increase is 6%. If we go one step further and remove transport, we are at 3.8%. So by about 3/4 of our cost increase comes from three waters or transport. That is the nature of the investment that's required to put in, especially in the water space. When you consider Tarawera and the wastewater treatment plant coming on, all the work happening with stormwater around the district, with the IIG stuff, with stormwater consents, making up the cost of the regulator. That's where our cost is coming from.
This doesn't include the museum. Just want to be clear. Decisions on operating the museum.
You would go on top of the 3.8.
Should we actually be looking at that slide, given that roading's not really part of the direction?
So roading is not included in the rates. Based on the wording of the proposal for rates caps, we are above the 4%, but we're at 6% excluding water.
So that slide we should be working off of that number 6.3 to.
There will be, I have been talking with mayors across the country about the recent reforms, and we will be pushing back strongly that roading should be included. You can see how significant it is. It is absolutely a core service. But there are other councils that have a small population and 300 bridges, 345 bridges, I think, but that they have to fix. So basically, if the government does not include roading, the councils will be in a very difficult position. So yeah, we'll see how that advocacy goes, though, where it lands. And we have the opportunity to make a submission before 20th of February. So hopefully we do have a response before we're finalising any annual plan or rates numbers.
I would also say that, as David said, there's no legislation yet, but the wording of the announcements anticipate that the long-term plan is where some of those big changes might come with the final implementation of 2029.
So the expectation will be that our long-term plan demonstrates a commitment in those first few years to trend down towards the cap with a hard expectation of 2029 that we are under 4% plus water.
Just a question on FOGO. Have we signed any contracts?
Yes, we have.
How much would it cost to get out of it?
Again, so can I just say, I haven't done any additional work to change or investigate any of this until I get your direction. So as we said at the start, if you give me a direction to go, it's austerity, let's work out, take a cost lens to everything, I'll do that. If it's a question of risk tolerance, then we'll do that. If it's a question of, carry on what you've started and finish it, I'll do that. I'm looking at that, and so we haven't. I knew this question was coming, but I'm sorry I haven't looked into some things and not others because I'm really waiting for and yourselves to give me the direction on what you want to do. There will be a cost. Just keeping in mind that cost profile will also change over a number of years. So you might end up with a change now, but in the future, as waste levies go up, it might prove to be less financial advantageous in due course, and by which stage the rates cap will be in, and so we won't, we'll be under even more pressure. So.
That's why I'm saying the rates capping issue is going to be something. The shame of it, all good programs like that might have to.
That's your decision.
The only reason I raise that is, again, it's anecdotal, but when I was doing the Festival of Gardens, I don't know how, but at least 3 of the Aucklanders that I spoke to said, different Aucklanders when they came, said that they basically have stopped doing it. Like, there's no one in their streets doing it at all now. You used to see the bins out there, and now over time it's got less and less and less. So it's
their ones are different.
yes, I know.
Whereas our one will be.
It's just human habit. They've obviously thought, hey, this was a great idea, and then petered out.
Probably stink. Yeah,
Harry, just
stink as well.
that's just administrative, really. When do we start splitting off the charging for water? Is that always going to be kept in the rates on the one invoice going forward until
We're working through we're working through how we can. Where the revenue side is likely to stay quite. We want a simple solution for the customer because we're not opening up a second bank account. We're not, we want to keep things as simple as possible for the customer. What is probably more important is that we will be legally required to ring fence 3 waters. So we'll be producing essentially 2 long-term plans. The expectations will be do 2 long-term plans, one for water, one excluding water. We will be structuring our systems to make sure that billing and debtors and balance sheet all are measurable by each individual water as well, and the rest of the council, which is the challenge.
Can I just add one aspect of our water services delivery plan that we adopted and sent out was that would keep things really clear for customers until 1 July 2028. So I expect that includes the billing, that we would see no change until at least that date. And that would give us, if there was a decision 1 July 27 to make a change, then we'd have a year to communicate that change. Having said that, there's nothing to, besides systems, make it more clear on the invoice. And if your question is more around how can we make it clear to our ratepayers that this is water and it's being ring-fenced, I think that's dressing up the rates invoice the right way.
Yeah, just to
We can do we can work to make that clear. We haven't done a rating review, so we can't combine or change. There's a legal way that the rates notice has to read because it relates to rates that have been struck. So we're limited. We're a little limited in how we can alter the appearance, how different charges appear, because there's a legal way it has to happen. But we can work in other ways to try and separate the distinction between water and other.
I'm just, leading people towards what a potential outcome is looking like, so they know what how much cost is actually applied to water and amongst this. But anyways, that's just an observation.
We want to. Should we do a bit of work and work out what we can make the invoice look like under the current?
So if anyone else wants to explore that, I'm just mindful that it's a considerable impact on our costs, and people need to know that before we start charging separately. It'd be good to see as part of our existing model.
I'll commit. We can commit to seeing to working on seeing what's possible. I think the point to stress is that it's still the same customer paying the bill, and they will, even if they see their core rates going up 6%, they'll notice their water's gone up 20%, and that's there.
Just explain the maths then. So rates increase is 10.7, which 6.3 is.
It's 6.3% of all of council's work except Three Waters increases by 6% from this year. All of council's Three Waters increases 19.9% from this year.
From this year.
Yeah, this is next year's rate increase. So.
10.7.
That's for all of council increases 10.7 from this year.
The two with different base numbers.
Denominator is different.
So just compared to the previous financial year of that.
It's a rate increase.
Yep. Is the Three Waters mostly stormwater?
Having met with the CFOs of Whakatane and Poriki and Kauro this morning, they are very, very similar. Water is the main driver behind everyone's rates increases. It will be the focus of the Commerce Commission to make who will be looking at our water service delivery plans to see that the work that we've said we'll be doing is done. So that's a key driver.
Talk Don's inquiries into FOGO and whether it's worth abandoning.
Taking action.
How the work program? I recall when we were talking out at the airport about how much time your team is committed to this and other things they've got on their plates. Then we sent you the task of the unitary authority. Is that even going to fly now? We're looking at something like this.
Well, unfortunately, we have to do that work anyway now. So effectively, if we're gonna again, and we don't have legislation, we don't have wording. I've spent quite a lot of time on the phone today with DIA trying to understand a bit more timeline. I know that they'll be coming to meet the mayors tomorrow. I think we're going to have a discussion with the mayors and CEs in the Bay of Plenty. We don't know when the Combined Territories boards are going to be established. We don't know if they're going to stretch over is their work going to be done in this triennium, or are the next mayors that come on board going to have to continue their work and then finish it in the next triennium? Can't imagine that. Is this current crop of regional councils going to finish their term and then the Combined Territories board? We don't know any of that. If it's not going to be that, and they are going to have to do their work this time, we've got to do the work with you. But staff have to do it. You've got to give us direction on supporting and informing the mayor on what to advocate for our district across all of those services that we would have had to consider as part of the unitary authority submission anyway. So that work, which I thought was optional, is now mandatory. What I don't know, because I'm now not in control of the timeline at all, is when exactly that's going to land. We're hoping to find out from DIA. I think it's very unfeasible that they stretch those 2 years, half in this triennium and half in next triennium. So I think it's more realistic that they choose one or the other. Either they finish those 2 years in this triennium, which means it starts in October next year, and so that's a significant amount of work in the early part of the next 3 years, or they leave it until to let regional council has finished their triennium, started it in 2029, and then take 2 years after that. So without knowing that timing, I don't know, but I suspect they're going to want it done in this triennium, in which case that's work that we do now. So
an announcement is not law, and so before mid next year, it will be put through as a bill to Parliament, and around about mid 2027, if all things go well for them, it will be legislated. And so regardless, it won't be law until mid 2027. But in the meantime, there is opportunity. Like, we shouldn't be scared of change, and I think there's really broad acceptance that change is required. But what I am also curious to know from you all is what would be your appetite to, like both elected members and staff, is what would be your appetite to ask that while we are trying to grapple with and put resource towards putting the best solution forward for change, can we have regulatory relief for things like annual plans, certainly long-term plans? All of these need significant and costly consultation. They could be changed within a matter of 6 months of adopting them. You could say the same for asset management plans. And representation reviews. And so whether or not we ask the government in the interim, in order for us to realistically, with the capacity that we have, focus on this, can we have regulatory relief and not have to also put the usual time and effort into the BAU process?
Asking for a moratorium, basically, to give us time to focus on the strategic stuff and leave the BAU.
It's the only way, even if it's just paused, like in post, like it's the only way we're going to be able to do a really good job of it.
I think if I just talk about, maybe David will know better, but I think the Local Government Act it requires us to strike a rate unless there's a change in legislation. So, this is what I was going back to the airport. This is what I was talking about, is if you want to do the big stuff, then this annual plan needs to be largely leave it as per the long-term plan, and then we put our efforts into that work instead. But that's for you to give me direction, or the mayor to give us direction based on the council's view. So.
If you're saying we can leave it as per the long-term plan, then it's only 7.9%, not 10.7.
Well, what I'd say is you made some decisions last year that pushed things into this year, and other things have changed. Look, sorry, my view, and staff can speak, but this is the start of the annual plan process. It's not the end. So there's a number of other things. I know you're going to be considering the museum, which for Rotorua is a really big part potentially of this annual plan. So I'm reluctant to, from staff, from the CE's perspective, advise you on how this is going to end. You've got a lot of work to do in terms of giving us direction of which scenario to explore that we outlined earlier. But as the mayor said, I mean, if the mayor can get us some regulatory relief from all of these things, then that would be fantastic. Sorry, not to put it all on you.
Would that be how? Like, I think that's very fair and reasonable, and I don't know how on earth audits NZ's going to be able to do all of this. Yeah, so I mean, reality is councils know our communities best, right, and our processes best. So if there is an easier way for us all to do it, why not suggest it?
And maybe the Regulatory Standards Act is a nice new mechanism that can be used for talking to the government about the last regulation. Did I say that out loud?
We did. When there were some councils that weren't quite prepared when the three waters changed, the local water done well, and you guys would know better than me, and then they were given relief to do it like 6 months later or something.
Yeah, so
that's sort of the thing I'm talking about.
So can I say that's worked out extremely poorly for at least some of those councils, which were caught between a 9-year long-term plan and a water services delivery plan, which stretched over a different period of time. A number of councils have got qualified audit opinions, which is not good, and because they were caught in that bind, we fortunately didn't. So. I'd also, David but I'll also caution about a path that leads us through audit at this point in time.
A qualified audit would impact the rate that we could borrow at. Essentially, would increase our risk profile for our insurers and for our lenders. So I would discourage any measure that would raise the ire of the auditors.
So Andrew, could you just clarify what you mean by any path that leads us to an audit?
A qualified audit.
So David said qualified audit. What I meant, maybe Greg can talk about this, is relying on Audit New Zealand to approve anything like a long-term plan amendment. So I don't know, do you want to talk about those, Greg?
You mean straight away this in the annual plan?
Yeah.
I think any significant deviation from fundamental cause of our long-term plan could trigger a long-term plan amendment, which requires us to go through a whole series, pretty much the development of a long-term plan, but only for the specific areas that are affected by whatever change you would like to make. But it is required to be audited by Audit New Zealand, and the timeline is incredibly tight for us to do that in the next 6 months, given the resourcing across the different auditing sectors, and internal resourcing as well. So that could be a change to significant levels of service, significant changes to our funding strategy, all that kind of stuff could potentially trigger a lot.
Yeah, so if we look at the timeline, we can show that the public consultation, all that would happen in the same month, would mean that we would be trying to get auditors for the site in February, which they have told me they do not have capacity for.
Sorry, they won't have capacity for?
To come on site in February for a long-term plan.
Thank you, thank you.
So I won't tell you the name of the council, but there is one council in New Zealand who's doing a long-term plan amendment this year, and they have binned their entire induction, and they have started on day one with their annual plan process in order to do an annual plan. That'll become public in the next couple of weeks, but they were left instructions by the previous council, recommended a long-term plan amendment. They've picked up, the new council has picked that up and is doing a long-term plan amendment now. They've used all their induction time and in order to do their work in time to get audit clearance. So just to give you an idea of that.
So, excuse this silly question, but would a 3% increase on what you've already said we would have in the LTP be enough to trigger an amendment, because it's not what we think we do?
Or if they're
It wouldn't.
it's the triggering of changes, significant changes to level of service, or significant changes to financial strategy that would trigger that.
I think how the public would view that. I think they'd view the increase more significant than changing to anything else. But anyway, that's beside the point. Okay.
Guys, just keep in mind that the legislative direction is that if you look at that graph, there would be no significance in engagement policy that would influence water charges in the future anyway. So just to be clear, that part is being taken out of the ability to have that public input anyway.
We'll just go back to the other graph with the roading transport in. Just explain to me why we can't use that as a starting point for communication.
And would we just have to be like subject to?
It strikes me we've got a reality disconnect with the public, right? CPI is different to what we've got up there, and it's coming down. There's the first disconnect. But I think this helps to explain where the big increases are. And so 3.8, right? That's where it should be. But it's then explained why we've got 20% for Three Waters depreciation. Does anyone understand that, apart from an auditor and an accountant? And then 25% or 24% for transport. You know, again, I'm guessing it's depreciation and costs associated with everything we do in that space. If you can communicate those things to the public, you might tone down the rhetoric. You might.
Is that, Karen, kind of like what you were thinking about having like
For the
separating it out?
the waters was different because that's the way we were going anyway in time. I just wanted to sort of show what it looked like rather than just blend when we yeah, this is what Greg's just signalled is actually a helpful way to show what the increases are truly for capital investment Structure,
That's a meeting.
getting caught up. CPI,
I think the communication, the key messages with our community will be very important.
Charles Dickens to be able to tell this story.
We can
Today,
try and bend it, but it's levels of service, right? We're starting to strike a line through stuff that may or may not be palatable, and then you've got the LTP conversation. I've got a few things that I see. Are they core? I don't want to say them out loud because I don't want to get anyone in a panic, but there are.
You are being recorded today. This will be for the website. It's not live stream.
Bringing the commissioners then.
just back to the question around FOGO, is that enough to trigger what we were talking about earlier?
Can I take that away to look at what the implications would be before I give that advice, please? Because there are a couple of ways to think about it, and I don't want to prejudice any commercial discussion.
Sure.
Would, I know we made that decision in confidential, so I won't be specific, but would one of the decisions we made yesterday, which gave us flexibility, could that be utilised to offset?
The way that the parking to the way certain activities have been put into the right budgets have been rates neutral, so that we have the expectation we have determined levels of income or cost, but with the assumption that it's rates neutral.
Thank you.
We finished your presentation. Sorry, one more before we are doing a strategic property review, and we've heard that we have underfunded repairs and maintenance to a large degree for a long period of time, and when that cracks open, do we have another big number to add into this?
That will not land in this annual plan. The conclusion of that activity will not be such that you'll be able to make substantive decisions in this annual plan. So that'll be a long-term plan conversation.
Okay.
As I believe it should be, because of the scale.
When the rates cap starts to kick in, well, that's some big numbers, museum and the property.
Potential for you to include the museum this year. Potential. That's what you need to consider through the annual plan process.
So we can
And it doesn't turn up in the long-term plan as an increase.
get ahead of the rates cap. Should put a number. That puts it to 10.7, right? What's that number? Huge.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah. Nicely well last night. Maybe not tonight.
Any other thoughts from anyone that hasn't spoken?
Thoughts at the moment, just it's good to get the information, and as we go through the process, get more informed and be able to make better decisions.
Can we go back a few slides, please? To the beautiful bridge. That one.
Richard, yeah.
So there seems to be a subset of expenses presented to us there. Like there's parks and reserves.
Included in inflation. It's more an activity is not listed there. It's generally because there have been no significant changes in the cost structure other than inflation. So the changes that are listed for a specific activity means that something has changed in their cost structure.
So there's a whole bunch of other things we could get the scissors out and have a look at. There's parks and reserves.
So again, I'll go back to what I said at the start. This is a snapshot of the comparison of this year. It's a rates increase graph. It's telling you what's driving the increase from this year to next year. At any point in the annual plan process, you can choose to change levels of service, which would then maybe be reductions from this year. What we're giving you a snapshot of where it is now at the start of the process. I outlined a number of scenarios, which were the settings that I could think of, but at the end, I think we'll put them up again for you to give us the direction of what you want to do, whether you want us to take an austerity view across the council and look at many services and consider cost as a primary driver. You can do that. Whether you want to take a look across the council and say we've got a higher risk tolerance, so look at insurance, look at contingencies, and tone those down and come back to us. You could say to us, steady as she goes. Let's look at continue what you've started. There are a number of those scenarios with which we can continue this conversation. We're just saying this is the start.
It's definitely, although we can, I think anything that we're questioning or saying staff will take on as feedback for next year, but although we're not making any decisions, but I also don't want to commit too soon on like clear directions. So hopefully just, perhaps we could just provide comments on what we're thinking from what we've seen. This is the first time we've seen this. So yeah, we'll try our best to provide some sort of direction, but it will need to remain open for next year.
I don't know. All I'm saying is this is the opportunity for us to hear from you. If you've got some consensus, if you need more information, if you want more time to consider things, obviously you're in charge of the process.
Can I just ask, how long have you known that this is the likely outcome? If this was going to be the starting point, how long?
I got this at 9:17 p.m. last night.
So just before you said, we're doing major changes to levels of service that will trigger an LTP amendment. Is that what you said?
Most likely, we would have to check each one on its own individual basis, and we'd have to get an opinion over the top of it.
What I was just asking about is if you were to change slightly levels of service and some of those things. So obviously you're doing business as usual, but it's now added on inflation. But if we said with some of those levels of service, we might be prepared to go, let's say, a little bit lower or a little bit different. How far could we go a little bit different before we triggered an LTP amendment to try and?
I think that will have to be taken on each individual basis, based on the impact on the community, how many people are using said service. I think all of those things have to be put into place for us to be able to understand and get a legal opinion over the top as to whether we would trigger an LTP amendment or if it would just trigger a special consultative procedure. So
if we said we want to find further efficiencies, we want to do things with some cost savings, and we direct our CE to find those cost savings and efficiencies for us.
Cost savings, yes.
So we could give you a direction around cost saving, and we expect you to say find X% in your operational budget staffing, without triggering any kind of amendment.
No.
So I'm not talking about austerity. I'm just talking about, can we give a general direction about moving towards cost reduction?
How far can we just do cost reduction without triggering?
I would need a little bit more than that, maybe not in this session, but in order to understand the implications on service and then come back to you with a lengthy discussion yesterday about me making decisions about items that affect the community. So I'll be bringing those back to you for you to consider and make decisions on.
If we recall one of Andrew's slides from the induction session around price, product and customer, that's the kind of direction we're aiming for around what products we're changing, what price, talking to the customer.
So last year, we kicked the Waikawa Bay Reserve $10 million budget down the road. I guess it's coming up for consideration.
Not in this year. It doesn't turn up in this year anyway. It's in the next financial year, which is the first year of the long-term plan.
So Prime Minister Luxon said we should go line by line through expenditure.
So should he.
Sorry?
So should he.
I think as we progress through annual plan workshops as well, we already have set 3 top priorities. And I think what we need to do is not get too distracted by the level of detail yet. We need to make sure that we have strong foundations. And so being very clear as a council what our community's expectations of us are in terms of our priorities for what we deliver. And then at that stage, I think, we don't want to go line by line until we're at the end of that process. So just that, hopefully we can go through this very strategically so that by the time we come to the point where we're adopting the annual plan and striking the rate, we all, hopefully majority, if not unanimously, supportive of what we're
to be appropriate at some point to ask the GMs to contribute to this conversation rather than elected members.
Yeah, I was just
later.
I was just conscious I was trying to leave this space for you rather than you hear from us a lot, but if you wish to hear from the team, direct questions at them anytime.
That's a good idea from anywhere, fella.
In the early new year, we'll certainly look to do that, and then we can delve into more detailed discussions with.
I'd hate to have painted ourselves into a corner that we can't change our minds on a particular thing because we've already gone out and said, yay, we're going to do this. We've been promising you this and this year we're going to start it. And then go, oops, we've opened the cupboard and the cupboard is bare. That would not go down well with our community. So.
We're here to make the hard decisions too. When the government changes your cupboard size.
That's right. Takes the cupboard away.
You go through the capital.
I wanted to put this slide up just to illustrate the size of the program for 2027. 120 million is extremely renewal heavy, more so than in prior years, and also very growth heavy. So grey being renewals and blue being growth. There's not a lot of spend happening on service, it's mainly renewals and growth. Where that's hitting. 3 waters and transport, places, but particularly if you the biggest ongoing driver for rates increases is maintaining and operating the things that we are building, and because we are spending more money in those areas, it's a significant driver behind those rates increases in 3 waters and transport.
So just to be clear, this is expenditure, and the growth part, a lot of it is not paid for by rates.
So the grey is paid for through depreciation, and the blue is paid by developers.
So levels of service increase for transportation, is that tar sealing rural roads?
Yeah, I mean, even some of that stuff we do get capital subsidies from NZTA for some of that as well. So it's more to illustrate the size of the spend.
Spaces and places. Kentucky Place.
So just that includes the museum.
Just back to the roading, it's the renewal of the surface of the road. It's no new sealing, it's the renewal of surfaces, the orange.
Level of surface would be changing to
Field extensions.
Field extensions, thank you.
What goes into the community leadership?
Property portfolio.
So the community is spending on our properties essentially.
using to.
Is that this building?
You know, the community impact.
Knowing what we don't need.
So with the waters out, are we basically not investing in growth, or it's just so small you can't see it?
We our DC policy only covers vehicles. We don't use for transport, so
Is there an area? No. Oh,
District development. Because there's nothing happening in district development.
This is capital works. Sorry.
Capital works. So what would, in terms of capital works for district
decided to
development,
do a huge city centre revitalisation project, and they
waterfront development could be.
Where's the 3 million CBD?
So the CBD's not planning this year.
no, it's the year for
Is the museum is involved?
2026, right? It's definitely supposed
Under
to
the
start
table,
next month.
3, so it's next year.
Oh no, sorry.
Who does the museum?
One
Yeah. We're committed to next year. It's been very public multiple times.
We'll just double checking.
Oh,
Check the Oracle. Hard
yeah,
copy.
Caldwell can.
he's checking.
Make the year go faster and then
It's coming early.
Can I say a couple of things, I think, for everyone to keep in mind? In the three waters movements,
627.
Okay,
in the three waters we have made and submitted to the minister a water delivery plan. The minister considered the delivery plan and approved the delivery plan as we submitted. There's nothing in here that is not part of the delivery plan. Going to change it, we're changing the delivery plan we have submitted. The minister has already identified that any rate capping would not include three waters because they do recognize that our regulatory growth, depreciation, renewal processes that are locked into delivery plans. So I think it's quite important for elected members to be aware of that. There's some discussions about waste management and FOGO and so on. It's a legitimate question. Do you want to go ahead with that? There are consequences of that. One of the consequences I would like to highlight is that if, for argument's sake, you stop FOGO simply because you want to save the net cost of the movement, that's FOGO, you need to count the balance of that. But by not collecting FOGO, you're collecting more waste that's going to be landfill. The net balance in dollar terms would not be very much different from that. Really, whatever you don't spend on the green waste collection, it will be counterbalanced by increased cost in landfilling. And also remember that landfilling, 60% of the landfilling, it's government taxes. And those government taxes over the next 2 or 3 years are projected to increase more. Very soon you'll find that whether you do FOGO or don't do FOGO, the cost of waste management will not change materially.
I think this is something we can come back and there was actually some awesome graphs that showed with the increasing clearly, and so when we can delve into that later, and hopefully by then we have at least a rough idea of what different decisions on that might result in, or whether they're even possible.
Just going back to that CBD thing. Do we use the opportunity next year
as you suggested, to canvass the ideas, get the ideas ready, because they will need to be costed, because we're probably not ready to spend it straight away. Anticipating that we spend next year. It's not to follow.
That's the commitment that's been made with the public and the chamber. But the consult, because the consultation was going to start early next year, right?
So it's meant to be coming back into the calendar.
Yeah.
So
But that's the consultation about the projects, not that we.
yeah, funding doesn't drop until the
So we need the year to work out
so funding doesn't come through until 2027.
28.
Currently, yeah.
The financial
Is that calendar year? Financial year. This financial year. Next financial.
for the LTP, and we're talking about generate ideas for this.
That's right, that's what I'm saying. So do we use next year potentially to, because we've committed the money, then we generate the ideas and they get worked up and we.
That's not starting next year.
Yeah, that's right. So we start that piece of work. So people come back with the ideas. We look at say what's workable and what's not. But we're not ready to spend the money yet. Is that how?
But I think quite honestly, after 20th of February, when the submission period closes to the government announcements, and then hopefully we have a response as soon as possible, and we may wish to strategically bring money forward into necessary investments. Exactly. Because I'm sure a conversation all councils again.
So I think I think I've alluded to this before, and I acknowledge that Your Worship, you've said the direction, but again, just putting some possible scenarios that you might give us a direction on for us to go away and do some work on and bring it back to you so you can have a more some more detailed discussions. Some that I thought of. A was obviously what I heard from you in your report back after your 2 days, finish what we started. B was, whether we do increase risk tolerance, self-insure, maybe do some targeted non-renewal of certain assets. So by how much? Maybe the Deputy Mayor's point earlier. Ambition, it's probably easier said than funded. And then the D is more of a kind of austerity, use cost reduction as a primary driver across the organisation and grow across the organisation and look for those cuts that we could make. But there could be other scenarios. Those probably cover the range, but there's probably a number in between that you might want to articulate for us. Bring the power.
Could we change the language and not talk about austerity? I don't think that's what we're talking about. It's about rates affordability or cost savings and reductions, efficiencies, rather than.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's used the word austerity.
Right, that's me describing a kind of potentially extreme scenario. None of the councillors have used that. So.
In one of the presentations, David maybe, I can't remember, talked about we haven't done a full fees and charges review for a long time. Was that you, David? Sorry.
6 or 7 years, maybe 8 years.
Was this an opportunity to really dive deep into that space? And
we if it's the decision of council to do that piece of work, that will be delivered for the long-term plan. So time it will take to.
In terms of the increase in risk tolerance, outside of the self-insurance, you're talking about like reducing renewals. What does that look like in practice? Like, what sort of renewals would you be reducing? Like infrastructure.
Well, again, didn't really want to consider it if there was no appetite for it. Clearly there's I'm not hearing much appetite for D.
It's D,
Um,
it's a strong D.
It's a strong D, but we're just saying use the wording that you
okay, so
saying you need to different language around how we want to achieve that. And I think you're the one that's been using the word austerity. We're not using that language,
But
we want
Oh.
definitely to look at
D. So D's the scenario that we're aiming for. We can do that.
I think probably it's more what I've got from our conversation is it's quite a strategic approach to cost cutting. It's not for me. It's not across the board. We've made very clear yesterday that there are things that we aren't interested in cutting costs in, but we haven't explored in fullness what other opportunities there might be, because there is appetite, I think, around the table to reduce costs, but ensuring that we aren't compromising things of huge importance in most instances. So I think it's being able to see what is available to cut costs and how we can do that. But yeah, there are things I think that aren't on the table and things that are on the table is probably the best.
Can we just be careful, because yesterday was really about only ending the trial. We still have a decision to make around the night market, so we hadn't made any decision yesterday around that, because we're still subject to a paper and other information coming. So that was all about just the trial location.
And that's where I think if we could, as you're saying, but if we can identify the areas that, so it's a little bit of a hybrid story. I think there are areas where we may wish to do more, and then there are areas where we're safe based on what we've heard from the community, and then we test that with the community, because all of this goes to consultation before a final decision.
Yeah, I guess maybe sorry, just maybe following on from Tarika's comment, that earlier slide that you showed, I guess you used it to the bridge, inflation 4.71%. Can we have that maybe a little bit of a breakdown into each area?
So just to be clear, A doesn't require a consultation with the community.
So for myself anyway, like I probably sit more in A as my primary driver. Like the just sitting there and just in D is really uncomfortable for me. Like Tanya's comment, like it probably costs all four of them. Yeah, like I think there might be some areas where we need to do more. Like if we're not doing it, no one else is going to do it. And we definitely know that there are things in the city that need improving. But at the same time, how do you do that in a cost-effective way, and how do you continue the work in our TP, which has already been committed to? So it's that balance between, and especially at this stage, I really struggle to give indication, like sitting in the first workshop on this right now, to give, from my side anyway, to give any sort of indication on where I think you should be going.
So we don't want to be the Grinch, but we also don't want to be Santa Claus.
Get your question answered around.
Yeah, definitely no Santa Claus.
No, not yet. But
I
don't think so.
What does it look like?
No, we haven't really done the work to understand that, because I'm trying to get some direction. So far what I've heard, there's some support for all of them, which doesn't really help me, but that's fine.
Well, just in terms of like what would be a big ticket item in what we're looking at, the risk change, in the risk, what would be the big?
Well, look, we can. There's almost anything we could do. It's implications, right? So we could have a different plan from what was submitted to the Minister in Water. We could go and try and get that amended, so using our spend in that direction. We could reduce our expenditure in transport and assets. And look, as I said in the very first session that we were in here, our cost profile is dominated by our assets. So to make big changes to our assets, big changes to our cost profile, we need to make big changes there. And as I said right from the start of these sessions, to make big changes to any of our cost profile, we need to look at those strategic pieces of work: unitary authority, fees and charges, levels of service, property strategy. Those are the big levers. And as I've said, the challenge we've got is you can't pull them very hard in the annual plan without triggering a long-term plan amendment. You can't pull them very hard at all without compromising your ability to pull them really hard in the long-term plan. And that's where. But at the same time, I need to get you. Well, we need to get together across the line on an annual plan before we can even think about a long-term plan. So there's that balance of trying to get something that's tolerable across the line, so that you can do that really strategic pieces of work that are going to have the most impact for multiple years and for a generation.
So I think what might be useful is, as elected members, we can have further discussion about, like, just together, about where we may feel comfortable sitting, and then in the early new year when we come back, we can provide. We'll commit to providing some better direction for you at that stage. If we go to the next slide, which is the next steps, just so we can give you an idea, because once we come back, we're going to be pretty full into it. So hopefully we'll start to lock in dates. I'm going to catch up with Greg and Andrew and maybe David, so that we can lock in dates with a bit of a plan.
Sorry, just one before we move off that direction. Is there a strong desire to understand in detail what an LTP amendment would look like? Because if not, if so, then I'll be asking Her Worship to bring us back next week and talk about that, because that's very, very significant piece of work. We'd need to go back to it with a very clear request that they resource us next year. Or are we coming out of this workshop saying, I'm giving you some direction, but we're not looking at an LTP amendment? Because frankly, the leave for staff, my leave, everything's affected, and I'll need to plan for that starting this week if this council wants to pursue a change that would trigger an LTP amendment.
And will we be able to get auditors?
I don't know, but I'll be dropping everything else and working on that, and as of tonight, if that's what you want.
David, are you going to say something?
Legally, they have to. If we tell them we're going to do a long-term plan amendment, legally they have to. We need to give them as much lead time. I mean, when they do our annual report, they bring in staff from South Africa or Malta, or I've had staff on the site from all corners of the country, but they would need lead time. So I need people. I would need a good lead time for them to upload this.
How about I'll have a bit of a chat with councillors. So I'm just also hearing that we don't want to lock in a direction yet, and I'm not sure that's fair being the first time. And then, it is the nature of 3-year terms of councils, and we're quite fortunate we've got a new council, and even as returning councillors, each year brings its own challenges. So we are understanding and hearing of the concerns if we were to need to do an amendment, but what we're also understanding and hearing is the strong reasons why we may need to also consider that. So yeah, we'll let you know if we do need to come back next week. I'm sure nobody will be adverse to that. We could also provide a Zoom option for those who are travelling, or who may be travelling. I don't know, actually.
Can I just ask, maybe the guys, our new members may not know, but I'm pretty sure it's 1.1 or 1.2 million per percent.
It's about 1.5. It's about 1.5.
1.5 now. 1.5. So if we need to find 4% savings, that's 6 million. We have to find somewhere.
That's a long-term plan amendment.
Is it that serious?
It's not just the dollar amount, it's what we would need to turn off in terms of service to achieve that.
I don't think you guys gave us a number as to where you thought it might need to be from a political perspective.
I would always love a 5.
We'd all have a 5.
Yeah, but we know our community response as well, so that's why I think we need to be well informed on what all of our options are, strategic on what we have for our vision of the city in the next not only year but 3 years, and how we can achieve that under financially challenging times and government pressure to be 4% or under.
So are you saying 5%?
Oh, I'm just saying I would always love a 5%, but I can't commit to that without knowing the significant.
I think we just heard that it's an LTP and everyone's working through their holidays to pull the thing to start again. So we've got our knickers in a twist at all of these annual plans and the LTPs around the levels of increases. You guys got elected, we had some change, but I don't think the world fell apart. We're doing our best to drive down or ascertain where we should be spending our money. It goes back to that 3.8 versus 20 and 25 for roading. And it's partly communication, it's real, what is reality versus, no one's going to be happy. No matter where you are, Ben will spend the money. Sana will be potentially at the other end of the spectrum and not happy with any spending, but somewhere in the middle, I think we've got to try and strike something that actually works for everybody. And I'd be happy with 7, 8 or 9 personally, but then it becomes a communication issue. 3.8% is what we're looking at, and that's keeping parks and rec and without touching any of that. And the big increases are in water and transport. What can you do about that? Those are needs.
If we can get roading excluded, we are talking a different game as well. And I do, as I mentioned, announcements aren't cool right now. We've got time, but the expectation from our community is certainly there too.
If we could get somewhere around that 7.9 or 8 or whatever it is, then it shows that we're doing what we said we'd do. That's one of the things that they keep throwing back at us, and you keep saying one thing and doing another. Now, people often don't care about what the reasons behind that are. They just care that that's the end result because that's all they see. So if we could get around that, I think sell that. It's just my opinion.
It comes back to the communication thing.
Apologies, I just have a Zoom call with Mayor of the Council.
7.
So I'll ask them how they're going. I'll let Sandra wrap up with you.
Tell them we're not bluff force. So 7.9 rate is 4.5.
I think what I was saying is that I think we just need a councillors only session just to have a bit more of a discussion around this, Andrew, to be able to provide you with more detail. We haven't had the opportunity to do that, given that this is the first session today. Greg, did you have some more slides still around the comms and engagement plan, which people are already talking about now? So I don't know if you want to look over to those slides.
No. So this was something that I wanted to raise. We did run out of time through our induction session, and the piece of work that my department has focused on historically. This is now closely linked with the comms and engagement team. But I wanted to talk you through how we develop an engagement plan, and there might be further opportunities for us to actually talk you through how specific project engagement plans are working. But at a high level, we have a significance and engagement policy. This is reviewed every 2 years as part of our long-term plan. Most of you will remember. This guides us on how we should engage with the community. We have an IAP2 framework, which guides us on how we should engage. Significance engagement policy of when we should engage with the community. our IAP2 framework on how we should engage with the community. So we have a stepped process, and I'll talk you through some of that now. That is what our one-pager engagement plan would look like. We do have a robust engagement plan that underpins that. That'll go alongside that. So what's critical for us is when we set up I'll use the annual plan as an example. When we set up a project team for the annual plan, that will usually encompass a bunch of different teams across the organization, largely my team with a number of us on that. Our comms and engagement and marketing team will have 2 or 3 representatives in that space. Finance would be in there as well. And then we would have subject matter experts who are very familiar with the specific proposals that we would be going out to the community on, that we would engage with throughout that process. So we'd have a core project team, and then we would pull in specific subject matter experts on specific topics as we need them, in order to help develop this specific project understanding. So what we then go and do is, as a group, we would then identify who our key stakeholders would be. So some of that is really easy. If we have a very specific development contributions policy, for example, our developers, off the top of my head, would be a very key targeted group that we would need to consult with. We would then also think about who are the wider groups that we might need to speak to. And that might be central government, it might be the general public if we're talking about how it's funded. We need to then also have a look at what our legislative responsibilities are around the specific proposals that come through. One thing that is quite critical for us, and we do this at an early stage, is understanding, and this changes pretty frequently, but it's understanding what our current environment is looking like within the community. Now, we had a situation last year, and I'll use this one as an example, where we consulted on local waters done well, but at the same time we had the fluoridation conversation that was happening at the council table. While we were consulting on the local waters done well, all the community wanted to speak to us about was around fluoridation. And so that's the environment discussion that we need to have, is if we're going to be putting a topic out into the community to speak to them about what is critical to them at that point, what is happening in the environment, so that we know what kind of conversation we can have with them. From putting all of that together, so understanding the project, understanding who our key stakeholders are, what our legislative responsibilities are, and what the environment is, we then start to develop what we call our comms and marketing plan around the specific project. And this is where our comms and marketing team are critical in being in the room with us, because it's not only about what is our message that we're pushing out to the community and how we're communicating with them, it's the mechanism that we use as well. So is it Facebook? Is it a direct targeted stakeholder email? Is it a group? Is it what we would call the World Cafe, or an opportunity for people to come in and speak to you as elected members, or a town hall where you can stand up in front and present to a group, which we have used historically as well. So what is the best mechanism to use for specific groups or communities of interest within our community? So we do quite a lot of work in how we approach that. We also put together a robust risk and mitigations table alongside each project. So as we start to work through this annual plan, we will start to see what proposals are coming through, what the communications would be. Is it sort of core services heavy? How do we approach that? What are the mitigations and risks and mitigations that we would need to take when we go through this engagement plan? So those are the steps that we take in going through an engagement plan. It is a critical piece of the puzzle when we are speaking to the community. We need to make sure we do have a robust plan together. It is quite expensive at times, depending on which mechanisms we want to use and how we want to engage specific communities. We have moved across towards the more digital way of communicating with the community, which has been quite successful, but we also know specific topics require specific targeted engagement. And so we do send out direct emails, mail to letterboxes if we need to, and all that kind of stuff. So this is a common practice through our IAP2 framework that we use largely across the organization. Every project will have a different sort of risk profile and how big it is versus how targeted it is. I'm going to take any questions as we go along. So IAP2 is an international accreditation of public participation. So one of their core values is that public participation is based on the belief that those who are affected by a decision have the right to be involved in the decision-making process. Okay, it is a national standard for quality public participation. We have done, a number of us have done some courses through the Australasia branch of IAP2. It guides ethical and transparent engagement processes. And in our significance engagement policy, we have a spectrum of that IAP2 provide us with, which is inform, consult, involve, collaborate, and empower. And so each one of those has sort of a public participation goal and what is our promise to the public. So this is in the presentation that will be in your Stella, but it's also in our significance and engagement policy. And so a lot of the legislative kind of consultation pieces that we do sit in that consult bracket. And that would be our policies and bylaws, our annual plans, long-term plans. They require us to push out proposals that the community feedback on and you as a council make a decision on, and we sit in that consult bracket. But we do see some pieces going into the involve, collaborate, empower space, where you may ask the community to help design a playground, for example, and they get into that involve, collaborate space. Inform is where we have what we would have had option A. We would go out to the community and say, we're not consulting with you on our annual plan, but we are just telling you what is in there. So that's how we would use that spectrum, and that's part of our engagement plan to understand what each stakeholder group might need. So not all of our community would be in the involve or consult space. Some might be in the inform, some might be in the collaborate. So it really does depend on where they sit on that spectrum. So we use the IAP2 spectrum as the foundation for our planning and methodology. And we're wanting to do this so that we're ensuring that we have transparency, inclusiveness, equity, and early engagement with the community, but making sure that we're setting our engagement plans up correctly so that we are targeting the right audience with the right conversation. It might sound quite easy, it isn't always. And so sometimes getting message back from the community is not as easy as sometimes us pushing it out. So it's making sure that we get in the right channels to use in that space. That's as far as I've gone today. I am very happy to bring something else back and speak in more detail around the annual plan when we do get there, to how we will consult with the community and who we see as key interest groups as sort of a working example of how we use this. So I would leave that up to the chair as to whether we would like to see that again. Happy to take any questions on this. Okay, straightforward.
Good. Questions? So maybe could we just use 5 minutes with just the councillors after this while we've got everyone here, and just have a little bit of a discussion, and then it might be that we'll just look at doing another council zoning session to have a little bit more of a discussion to provide feedback. So thanks for the staff for this piece of work. It's the first in the workshop series. So Trevor, did you want to
Noi tātou. Kia taua no, kia tātou kato, kia te whai o tō tātou ariki ahi kraiti, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki ta wairua tapu ai anei a. Ake tōnu atu. Amen.
Amen.